Yeah, we are in the place to be.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Kirk Anderson, and you're watching the Kirk Anderson Show. Today, I have a special guest in the studio, which is sometimes a rare but fun way to connect with people locally. And so I have Stacy. Is it pronounced Hilde?
Hilde, yep.
Okay, Stacy Hilde, and she is part of We Support Recovery. And we're going to talk today about a variety of different topics. She's got many hats that she wears, and so I'm excited to talk about some of the crises that we have in our Quad County area, the St. Croix, Barron, Burnett, and Polk County, as it relates to chemical use, drugs and alcohol, and the efforts that your organization, but also the counties are doing to help people who are struggling with those issues. And so I just want to welcome everyone to the show as people start to come and watch. I will say good morning to Ben. Thanks for being here. Ben is from Dryden Wire, obviously, owner and operator. So if you have questions about recovery, specifically with drug and alcohol use, feel free to ask those as part of the show. We'll put those comments up on the screen, and we'll try and answer them as we go as well. Before we get started with the story with Stacy, I'm just going to pause for a brief second to introduce our sponsor and say thank you to Rhett Bozen for being our sponsor.
Are you ready for a new cell phone or cellular service provider? Rhett Bozen's an AT&T authorized retailer and is ready to get you connected. Skip the store and get personalized support at your business or home. Call Rhett today at 715-771-3535.
All right, thanks for Rhett being the sponsor of our show. It helps us keep things moving along. And definitely, if you have questions, please put them in the comments. Stacy, I want to just take a minute to kind of hear your story. I didn't do a lot of homework on your organization because I wanted to kind of have a natural conversation about it. So tell me a little bit about your background and why you are passionate about helping people through that recovery, when you could be doing something else that probably makes more money or makes more sense. But you've invested in this. So tell me a little bit about you and your husband's your work.
Sure. So I'm Stacy Hilde, and my husband is Robert Hilde. He goes by Bob. He owns Angel Hands Thrift Shop up in Frederick. When we met, my husband was struggling with a secret addiction to opioids that he had struggled with for most of his life. He got hooked on painkillers when he was probably 18 years old. He worked for a doctor at that time who gave him a giant bottle of Vicodin, 100 Vicodin for a very, very minor injury. And that just began a really big spiral in using all kinds of opioid drugs. And he was able to hide it from most people because he's a very charming man. He's handsome, he's joyful, he was at work every day, and so nobody knew for a really, really long time that he was struggling. And this went on for a good 20 years of his life.
Really?
And even when we met, I had no idea that he was so caught up in the addiction, and he was a very good father, very good husband when we had finally gotten married, but I knew something was off. And so when we knew we were ready to get married, I just said, honey, something is off here. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but we need to get this figured out before we would agree to get married. And he, of course, knew exactly what it was, and he went and found help by himself. So we had lived in Minnesota at the time, and he was able to get some help with medication-assisted treatment. So he went through a program, and he's actually still on medication-assisted treatment after 16 years sober. That program helped him live. He knows that now, if he would have not gotten that type of help, that he would have been dead because of the fentanyl mixed in with regular drugs that he was doing back then. So he's so thankful for that treatment. But we had always been involved in community service in our marriage. So we joined a church in 2006, and we were absolutely involved in every volunteer event we could do. We worked with homeless and housing agencies. We created a statewide community service leadership group to be able to help churches in our denomination start their own local community service programs. So service has always been that's always been what we do. And it was just recently in the last few years that we kind of changed our ministry to the recovery ministry. We had some personal experiences with losing people due to overdose. My very good friend in the past lost her daughter to overdose, and also her daughter's boyfriend, which left her little babies without any parents, and the grandparents were raising those kiddos. And then when we moved up here, through the church, we met these beautiful boys, these three beautiful boys whose parents both struggled with a lifelong addiction. They ended up losing their father, and we took two of those boys in as foster children. So that the story is so close to our hearts. So not only with my husband, but our friends and their families are losing people and raising their grandchildren. And my husband, I said, owns Angel Hands Thrift Shop, and in that thrift shop, all the time we have customers coming in and asking us to pray for them and their family members who are struggling with addiction. And we just realized that this was a recurring thing every single week, that we were trying to help people, and we were praying for people also who were struggling and just lost, and they couldn't find their footing to get that help that they needed. So we did a really big community interview session. I'll back up just a minute. So we are Christian. We're a faith-based organization, our nonprofit is, but we're not faith exclusive. When we had Angel Hands Thrift Shop, we would do all kinds of different ministries. So we would help people with gas and grocery vouchers, free clothes, furniture when their houses burned down, things like that. When that burned down, I felt this overwhelming message from God. That ministry is done, and you're now in the recovery ministry. And it was just that simple. And so right then, we started interviewing the community leaders. And we interviewed about 30 over a period of about a year. And we found overwhelmingly that housing was the biggest need. Housing, transportation, and access to sober recreation. So that's how we got started in the recovery ministry.
So when you talked a little bit about the overdose issue, we had a little bit of a discussion. My background also is with fire and EMS, and so I see overdoses every once in a while. I've helped with Narcan delivery to patients and have seen people come back from that. How prevalent would you say the overdose is in the 4 counties that we're kind of surrounded by in St. Croix, Polk, Burnett, and Barron? I know Barron with Chris Fitzgerald and Ben have a show, and they talk a lot about the whole the deaths that have happened in Barron. It's becoming a big concern over there. How often do you see that? And what can we do other than give them Narcan? What do the recovery efforts look like?
Right. So I'm not super familiar with the overdose numbers in our 4 counties, although I do sit on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council here in Polk County, and Sheriff Walk said that it seems like we're not getting reports of the overdose Narcan administration that's happening person to person. So thankfully, we are getting Narcan into the community a little bit more, so that just a peer who's with another peer who's going through an overdose, they can administer the Narcan themselves. Comparatively, in Wisconsin, our overdose rates in Polk are pretty low. It seems like Sawyer County is really, really struggling right now, and so we've had a lot of conversations in that area. The St. Croix Tribal Center had just reached out to Polk County and to We Support Recovery, asking us to give them Narcan. They had run out of their supply, and so we had lent 100 kits to St. Croix Tribe so that they could distribute those.
Where do people get Narcan if they're an individual user? I know that the fire department can order it, the police department has it, the sheriff's department has it, but where do individuals go to get that, and is there a cost to that?
Okay, so at the moment, we have Polk County is a Narcan distributor, and they will do just a short training teaching you how to administer it, and they will distribute that to you for free. And also then if you use that or it expires, you can just ask Polk County for more. So you would contact Polk County Behavioral Health Department, just the main helpline there. And then We Support Recovery, we just became a Narcan distributor, and we will provide that training as well, and free Narcan. If you're not comfortable going through one of those agencies, a lot of pharmacies are now carrying Narcan over the counter, and that has just recently been authorized. And the cost is usually around $50 for a kit of 2.
Okay.
So that's really nice that you have that available, but certainly if you want the free resource, go to Polk County Behavioral Health or We Support Recovery.
So because it's something that is over the counter or something that you can get for free, we can't really track the use of that, and so it could be a much higher, unless they were to die, they could recover from that and never report it. So,
Exactly.
So we really don't know. But we know
Exactly.
that, do we know numbers as far as how many are picked up and not purchased but given away? Is that a high number?
We will have those numbers. That's very new in our counties, though. So through the Narcan Direct program, through the state of Wisconsin, we have just really begun that here. So we don't have any reported numbers yet. Their current cycle ends in September. So then once September comes in, we'll have better numbers to see how much was actually distributed and then how many were redistributed because of use.
Right.
So that will be a good number to at least guide us in that. But another thing I want to talk about for how we would handle overdose when we hear about it, there's a program called ED to Recovery, and Wisconsin Voices for Recovery is a statewide organization that is helping to get these programs up and running, and We Support Recovery is very interested in getting that started. So we've been in contact with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery. We have a recovery coach named Sean Matthews who is already doing this organically. He's working with Amory Hospital, and if they have somebody in there who's really struggling with addiction and maybe is in the hospital for a mental health crisis or a substance use crisis, they will often contact our recovery coach, Sean, and he will provide peer support to that person. But the ED to Recovery program is really meant for that immediate follow-up anytime someone has been hospitalized or had contact with first responders. And so you can refer someone to us, and we can kind of pick up that conversation with that person after the immediate crisis has been balanced. You know,
Right.
after they're ready to go home, what happens next?
Right.
So that's where we would step in then, and we would provide recovery coaching and peer support to help connect them to treatment and other resources. If they're not quite ready for treatment, then we would just help them create their own wellness plan.
So you talked about mental health, and obviously that goes hand in hand many times with the use of narcotics and drugs for maybe start as recreational, but addiction. How prevalent is that in your conversation as you're going through these programs? I would imagine that as you're talking about one, the natural follow through is with the other.
Right.
So what does that look like for people from a timeline standpoint as they go through that recovery? Is it something that is, once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic and you're recovering? Or is there, how does that work? I guess I'm not totally
Sure.
familiar with that addiction cycle.
Okay. So with the mental health piece, experientially, we ask everybody we have a Partners for Recovery Coalition, which we can talk a little bit more about. We ask the people in that room all the time, which is agencies from all over the county, providers, law enforcement, peers in recovery, sheltering agencies, and we say, how many of the people that you're serving who have a substance use disorder, how many of them also have a mental health disorder? And this is not an accurate number like statewide or nationally, but here our people in the room said 100%.
Yeah, I would say that sounds.
Absolutely. Now, statistically, you're not going to see that number, but this is what all of our people in the room who are serving them every day say. Every person that we have served with substance use disorder also has a mental health disorder, and that's called a co-occurring disorder. So that's in almost every conversation we have about how to better help people. It's not just about substance use treatment. So anytime we're connecting someone to resources, we're really connecting them to a dual diagnosis type of treatment. So someone who can not only just treat the addiction or a behavior and help them change a habit, it's about treating the underlying mental health condition. As far as are once an alcoholic, are you always an alcoholic? There are so many opinions and theories about it. I would not say there's concrete science behind that.
Right.
There's many Christian people who believe absolutely that you can overcome alcoholism or addiction through treatment, of course, but also through prayer, and that God can heal you. There are many other people who go through 12-step programs and believe that, you know, once you have an addiction, you are always in recovery, always. There's other people that absolutely just believe that I went through all the steps, got treatment, and I'm done, I'm good. So I can't give you a good answer on that cycle as far as lifetime, but I'll say my husband, for his 16 years in sobriety, is still on medication-assisted treatment.
Yeah.
He himself knows that he is going to need help his whole life. He's doing fantastic, amazing. He's a business owner. He's, like I said, he's an amazing father. We're foster parents. We have a fantastic life, a joyful life, a meaningful life, but he still gets help every single month.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us in the faith community realize that we're one step away from falling into like a bad place, and so there's a lot of police and firefighters who go through all the training and they become really good at what they do, but one of those calls really affects them and they can fall into a bad place, or just you know. I kind of joke with, not joke, but I kind of have had conversations that the place where we grew up and where we lived has allowed us to have a normal life. If we grew up in 1936 in Germany, any one of us could have been one of the Hitler Youth and done atrocities, you know. So it really depends on the surroundings that you have, the moral compass that you're given, and the people that you surround yourself with. So I don't take it for granted that like I've had a really good life and don't have a lot of those issues, because I certainly could. There's nothing that's special about me or anybody else that has, you know, other than maybe my faith, that has allowed me to make some good choices. But I have no misconception, and I'd never challenge Satan to say you can't get me. I say no, I think you could get me, so I'm going to rely on my faith to not go there. So
we have a really good point too about our surroundings, and that's something that we try to address in Polk County has a substance use work group coalition. It's called Polk United, and the substance use work group is just a part of that, and they focus on prevention. And one thing that we try to bring awareness to is that alcohol is our #1 addiction issue. And we like to talk about meth because it's very prevalent here.
Yeah.
We talk about opioids because that's where all the money's coming right now, and we know that we're headed to some dangerous things here with fentanyl being laced in all kinds of our drugs. But we forget to mention in every conversation about drugs that alcohol is our #1 problem, and especially in Wisconsin, where we have we're one of the heaviest drinking states in the entire nation, but it is a social norm. It's an acceptable social norm, and it's in so many community festivals. We have alcohol in so many different events. So our surroundings here have made that a part of our daily life.
Right.
And so we're definitely battling that all the time, because people are much less likely to get help for alcohol for a much longer time.
Sure.
Because of the social acceptance.
And for a lot of people, it doesn't seem to be an issue until it is an issue. And if you hang out with people for dinner and you have a glass of wine or something like that, that might be okay. But that's not the norm for what I've seen in my years of growing up in Wisconsin. It's generally a very intoxicated, fun event, and eventually that may come back to bite you. So
Absolutely.
I do see that, and I wanted just to talk a little bit about the fentanyl and the laced things. I know that our sheriff went to Arizona with the St. Croix County Sheriff, and Congressman Tiffany, I think, was there, and they went down and they saw the border. They saw the debris that was left behind from all the drugs that were being brought over, and the human smuggling that was coming over. That's becoming more and more of a problem, where those drugs are laced with specific drugs that will cause overdose. Is there any warnings that are effective to people who are struggling with this to get them not to, to stay away from certain types of drugs? Is it education? Is it they have to experience it? Because I see this, and I'm very nervous as a leader of a city in St. Croix Falls, where we're a border town. We see a lot of people coming through, and a lot of those people that are bringing drugs do get busted, but it's a small percentage probably of the people who are actually coming through to Wisconsin. And from my understanding, a lot of the drugs are coming up to the cities and then being distributed into Wisconsin through the Highway 8 corridor down in Hudson. So I'm concerned as a mayor, I'm concerned as a first responder. What's the answer? And I'm sure you have it.
I think what we learned is that, so we always say that recovery is a puzzle, and the puzzle pieces are different for every person.
Sure.
But I think prevention is the number one thing if we're talking about trying to prevent fentanyl deaths. Because we need to start when the kids are younger. We need to start in the schools as well with some substance use addiction prevention strategies. And so Polk United does a really great job at implementing all sorts of strategies. And the great news is that most of those strategies are universal across all the different substances that the kids might use. So it's much more about like delaying use. So it might not even just be about saying don't ever use anything, don't ever drink alcohol, don't ever vape. It's more about any year that we can delay the use for a young child and a teenager increases their ability to make good decisions later about those substances. So the earlier they start using, the higher their risk is to become addicted to substances. So really, I'd say if we're trying to prevent fentanyl deaths, it's about prevention in the schools with the youth. If we're trying to save people's lives, it's about Narcan training and distribution. There's also fentanyl test strips that have mixed reviews, but there's definitely evidence that those can help people who are actively using opioids. They can test their drugs and see if there's fentanyl in them. Experientially, people that I've met say they don't care, they're not going to use fentanyl test strips, and there are other people who are actively, purposefully using fentanyl. So that's very difficult too.
Yeah, I think we kind of get in this idea that fentanyl is being laced in there and it's to kill people, but there are people who use fentanyl as the drug, and they are not overwhelmed by it because they've built up that immunity to it. There's something as a dad of 5 kids that makes me nervous to have that conversation with my kids, because you don't want to expose them to things. But the reality is that kids are already exposed to them. Now, we homeschool our kids, so our kids probably are less exposed. But even in the times that they're in sports, or they're with their friends at play practice, or in band, or whatever activities they have, they are being exposed. And so it'd be very naive for us to say, well, our kids aren't going to do it. Even though we hope that they won't. And as I drive down through Dresser, on the left-hand side, there's a big billboard that says, some statistic about you got to talk to your kids early. And I just go, I don't want to have that conversation. It's kind of like sex. I don't want to talk to my kids about sex either. But the reality is you got to do that. So just break the ice for us. Like, how young are people doing drugs? Like, what are we talking 16? Are we talking 9?
We're talking 9.
Ugh.
Yes. So 9 is really becoming a popular number right now with the people
Which is incredible.
that we're serving now. We asked them, what age were you when you started to use? 9, 10, 11. Most of the people I serve started by 11. 13 is usually the oldest that the people that I've served
Right.
have started. So we like to think as parents and community members that we shouldn't be educating our kids about this until they're minimum of 5th grade. Well, 5th grade, they're already 10 and 11.
Right.
So there are programs coming out that are evidence-based programs. They've been tested and researched, and they're helping starting as early as 3rd grade. They're not having frank conversations like the DARE program. So the DARE in my generation is what we went through in
Right.
5th grade, and it was proven that it did not work. So that's why
Right.
we do not do DARE in schools anymore. But there are programs that have been shown to be effective, and they just help kids make better decisions overall. So I really think that we need to start early.
Sure.
Now, having that conversation, there are some tools that the state has been developing called Real Talks. So if you go on like the Wisconsin Department of Health Services website, or you can just type in Real Talks Wisconsin, and it'll pop up and it'll model some conversations for you. There was also a campaign called Small Talks, and so what they did is they'd have an app that you could use, and it would give you an idea of how to have that conversation with your kids. There's also something called conversation starters, so little topics that you can talk about with your kids at the dinner table, but it doesn't have to be always about drugs at all.
Right.
It's just about better decision making and that connectedness with family. Connectedness with a positive adult mentor is huge.
Right.
And so I know that your wife is involved with kinship, and that is an incredibly wonderful prevention tool, that healthy relationship with an adult. We have 2 foster boys who were involved in the kinship program. And one of them had just a fantastic mentor for many, many years. And I know that relationship has helped him make better decisions his whole high school career since we've
Right.
had him. Yep.
Well, I think that, we really put a lot of effort into meals at home with our kids, in, spending time together, and because of my work situation and my wife's work situation, we've negotiated that so that that's a priority. But I also know, because I go into a lot of people's homes, that that's not necessarily the norm. I know that food insecurity is a huge issue in Polk County. Like 1 in 6 kids are hungry and struggle, and so if they don't go to school, they might not get food. I know that there are parents who are drug addicts, and their kids are kind of left to raise themselves, and so that's a huge concern too. So I feel blessed that we've kind of escaped some of those issues, but yes, we need to talk with our kids ongoingly, but we also need to have those relationships with the kids. And then I am not a huge fan of it takes a village, but that's probably just because of some political things that were around that. But I really do think like the mentor thing is huge. My kids have been very close to church friends and staff that have been real positive in their lives, and have had instructors in different sports that have come alongside them in safe and healthy relationships. I do have a question here from Shara, who's my wife, and she loves to comment on my shows. So she says, thanks so much, Stacy. What would you recommend as a first step for someone who has a loved one struggling with addiction but won't seek help?
That is the hardest question. I haven't found the answer to that yet.
I'm sure, yeah.
But I'll tell you, that's something that we're so interested in working on. So our organization is still really new, and we get people coming up to us all the time and asking that question. Really, it's about connecting them to resources when they need help. So Wisconsin Addiction Recovery Helpline is a great resource that's statewide. So that's 211 runs that program. And so if you're able to call 211, you can get connected with local resources that your loved one may need. So it might be a connection to a treatment facility. And we have quite a few different treatment facilities available in Polk County and our surrounding counties, which I'm so thankful for. A lot of us that are serving people feel like we're lacking resources, but it's not true. It's not true at all. When we created this Partners in Recovery Coalition, and we started to map out all of the amazing resources that we do have in our community, we are actually really rich in treatment and recovery resources. But you cannot change your loved one's desire to get help. And so a lot of people say, go to Al-Anon meetings and learn how to cope yourself with their addiction so that you can be healthy, but also so that when they are ready for that help, you know how to help them.
Sure.
That's the tough one. I'm going to write that down in my notebook because it's the question that we always ask and we don't have a great answer.
Right, yeah. Well, Renee also had a comment, and I'll put that up on the screen. So life skills learnings, totally think all students should take a class in early years education and later a refresher course mandated in high school. Just keep the doors open to our young people. And I agree with that. I think having those classes, and I remember DARE as well, and I remember the statistics that it may have even caused some kids to go experiment with drugs, and that wasn't the,
yes.
the point. But certainly having those conversations and having conversations about all sorts of different things is really important. Not assuming that your kids are the 1% that doesn't fall victim to peer pressure or to the struggles that they may have in life. So that's really important. So
Thank you, Renee. So Renee mentioned life skills, and that's actually an official, one of the official programs that they do use in schools. Botvin Life Skills is one of the programs they're using, and that's shown some really positive results. So thank you for bringing that up, Renee.
Yeah, that's really important. So I don't know what the answer is to it, but I know that people helping and being a part of the solution is a big part of the answer. And so you've partnered by creating a company or an incorporated LLC or whatever it may be, but you're partnering with a lot of different resources. You've mentioned several statewide and countywide organizations that are part of it. One of the things that is a struggle for our area is that we don't have a place to send people who are in that crisis. The closest recovery for like an alcohol or drug addicted type person is on the other side of the state. And so when a law enforcement officer is called to a medical scene because someone's overdosing on something, they have to go through a very difficult process when truly there's help right over in Minnesota about an hour away, but we have to go 4 to 8 hours away to get them into a program that Wisconsin supports. So it's really challenging in that sense. Do you know of any short-term emergency type things that are on the horizon, or that we could petition our governor for in this area? Because I see that as a kind of a challenge for people that are in crisis.
Right. So I do know that there is L.E. Phillips. Where is that? Is it Chippewa Falls? I believe it's Chippewa Falls. That's another center that people often go to when they're in a mental health or substance use crisis. And they also have a detox center there. And that admittance would come through an emergency department. So we can get people into an emergency department locally, and then we can transfer them if they have openings to that L.E. Phillips. So that's much closer.
Right.
There's a lot of funding coming down as far as grants go to helping us create some crisis centers. It's just that our counties maybe haven't had the conversation in advance of those grants coming down to be able to plan it in time to apply for the grant. So if we start working with our county coalitions right now and say, okay, how can we set up a small 4-bed crisis center, let's say, we can do it. We can get it funded as long as we plan it before that grant comes in.
Right.
So I would say let's start having that conversation more and more often. And we just sent out the very similar email in our Polk United Coalition and in our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. This money is coming. Let's start planning right now so that we're ready to handle crisis and to handle, there's a program called Deflection, where sometimes law enforcement can do something different than put someone in jail if they're going through a crisis. and we can connect them to resources right away instead of making them spend the night in jail.
Right.
That takes a lot of planning
Yeah.
to create a program like that, but there's funding coming down for that too.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of foresight and creativity from the county's perspective of how they're going to handle that. I know that
Yes.
they've worked really hard on keeping criminals out of the jail system if they can, by putting them through like a outside program that the district attorney can, I think it's the district attorney can refer them to, and they can go through like a different option before they hit the jail circuit. Because once you're in there, it's probably less likely that you're going to get the help that you need, and it becomes punitive instead of transformative.
That's right. So that's called treatment court. Well, they have a few diversion programs. So those are called diversion. Right now they have a very successful treatment court program, and they also have substance use diversion, intoxicated driver intervention program, first time offender program. They have some really fantastic programs that they're working with. And our organization works closely with treatment court participants as well. They'll have anywhere usually between 10 and 16 participants. In fact, I have people that I have served through our recovery house. So that's a separate private entity called
Right.
Angel Hands Recovery Homes. And we have people in there a lot of times who have gone through treatment court, and they get an intense amount of support surrounding them. It's a fantastic program, can take 1 to 2 years to complete. And they have weekly interaction with the judge, with the DA or ADA, with probation agents, with the case managers, with corrections officials. So it's a pretty awesome program.
Yeah.
And they
that's
connect them with
something
treatment resources.
You are running, that's part of your...
No, we have people who are involved in treatment court, and so we partner with them to do projects and things like that. And we help provide housing through our Angel Hands Recovery Homes.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's partnerships again.
Partnerships,
So
yep.
from your perspective, or from your organization, with you and your husband, you kind of have several pots. You are doing We Support Recovery.
And that's that's a
That's
nonprofit.
a nonprofit. And then you're doing the thrift store, which supports some of the
recovery
work.
house.
And then you're doing the recovery house. So talk just a little bit about the recovery house as far as how that works, who can go in there, how it's funded.
Sure.
We should probably talk about, like, the nonprofit obviously is raising money for all this, but lack of resources is one of the barriers that many people find to helping people in recovery, is that either the state doesn't have the money for it, or it's a challenge. Finances are one of those difficult things that we all deal with. So
Absolutely.
who pays for all this?
Okay, so I'll start with Angel Hands Recovery Homes, because that is the private entity that my husband and I started with money out of our pocket and Angel Hands Thrift Shop. So Angel Hands Thrift Shop's a private business. Angel Hands Recovery Homes is a private business. We bought our first home in 2020 in Frederick, and originally it was designed to house men. So we ran it like a model similar to another housing agency that's close by that's fantastic, called CROIX Sober Living for Men. They have homes in Amory and New Richmond, Menominee, Somerset. They're just a fantastic group. So we had set it up to serve like 7 men at a time. We'd have about 2 men in a bedroom, and they'd all be in different stages, but in early recovery only. But we never found the balance with that. Julie Smith, that owns CROIX Sober Living, she finds the balance, and they do great. We knew that it wasn't quite right. So all of a sudden, one of our guys that had just graduated said, what I really need is a place where I can bring my wife home and we can get custody back of our son. And so he said, can we rent this 3-bedroom side from you? And so we don't rent out anything. They can be a part of our program. So we offered that solution. We said, we're not going to rent it to you, but if you guys both want to be a part of the program, you can stay here as a family. And so that's what they chose. So they had been living in the 3-bedroom unit for a long time. This gentleman's been sober for over 2 years. He's doing fantastic. He got custody back of his son.
Awesome.
They had a new baby, and now he's a single father. He's raising both his son and his new baby. They're just doing amazing. So then we have 2 family units now and 2 single units that can be either for a couple or a single person. People hear about us usually through their probation agents or through treatment programs. And then they just give us a call and say, hey, do you have an opening? We have them fill out an application. We have some requirements. So we're sort of not in the early recovery stage anymore.
Right.
We're in what we call phase 2. So we expect people to coming to us now, they need to be sober for at least 4 months. They need to have a driver's license and a full-time job, and they need to be ready to work that program of recovery. So we usually refer people down to Onyx Sober Living to get that stability in the first 4 months. And then when they leave there, they still don't have housing. They still
Right.
need that support to restart their life. So we're kind of in that next phase.
Right.
We also have another home in the area called Butterfly House, which is here in St. Croix Falls. And they help women who are in that first stage of, I think she usually goes for at least a 6-month program.
Okay.
And so there's a few resources for people that are just starting out. We still need more. We need more housing for that first early recovery phase.
Yeah, I kind of have the vision of the what does it matter, as you're walking down the beach and there's all these starfish all over and you're tossing one at a time. And people can get overwhelmed by the mass amount of people that need help and say, well, what does it matter? And I would imagine for those individuals that are in your house, it matters quite a bit for their recovery. So in comparison to the need, you have just a handful of houses. How many houses could Polk County utilize if it was truly to be like a wish list? Like, how big's the need in our 4 counties around us?
That's a really great question. I would say we could easily use another women's house, and we could easily have another men's house. But the biggest need is family housing. There's a lot of people who don't get the help they need because they don't want to leave their kids. But if they could get support with their children
Right.
in a home, I think we have such huge potential there. I'm involved in 6 coalitions, some regional coalitions, statewide coalitions, and almost every conversation, almost every meeting, we bring that word up, families, families, families.
Right.
How can we support the family?
Renee had a comment as well. Those crisis centers, and she was referring back to what we were talking about, will they provide childcare when a family turns their backs on a member who is requesting help or is without a family?
I would say no. Those kids end up in Child Protective Services, and they get support through a foster family. Yep. So that is something. There are a couple, though. I will correct that. There are a few programs that are popping up, and there has been funding, especially for pregnant and postpartum mothers.
Okay.
So there's more and more programs helping new mothers with those children and young children. So. And
How
I know
often
some
do
people who've gone through
lose
those.
their kids in the midst of recovery with CPS? Is that
More often than not.
and-
Most often, people lose their children.
and getting them back would be a challenge, but having stable housing and
Yes.
these programs would allow them to have a chance at getting them
Absolutely. Stable housing is one of the biggest requirements, and seeking help and keeping up with help.
back. Right.
So we have a lot of outpatient counseling resources. We have intensive outpatient resources. We have some great programs around here. So Amory Programs for Change and Whole Life Services, they both provide that intensive outpatient sort of system. Polk County Behavioral Health is starting to serve again more in that arena with outpatient counseling. So we have a lot of help, but if they could have the stable housing piece figured out,
Right.
they could get back on their feet.
So how hard was COVID on the recovery efforts, or even just people getting involved in the chemical and drug use from that post 2020 when we were all stuck at our homes and going crazy? How difficult has that been to come out of that? Was there an uptick, or was it pretty stable? A lot of people kind of say that COVID caused an uptick in mental health. Do you see an uptick in drug use and alcohol and things like that?
Definitely with alcohol. There's a lot of research that's been done that showed that alcohol really, really increased. And I'm not sure what effect it was with meth. I do know that there's a beautiful quote that people love to say, is that the opposite of addiction is connection. And I'm not sure how to pronounce this gentleman's name. Johan Hari, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And so a part of our mission is connection. That's our main mission, is connection. And when COVID happened, we lost that connection, the in-person connection. That was really hard because we started our program in the midst of COVID. So Angel Hands Recovery Homes, our first one was August 2020.
Oh.
And so all of a sudden, we require our guys to go to 4 house meetings a week during that first 4 months. And so all of a sudden, there's hardly any in-person recovery support meetings. So they're doing them online. Thankfully, there were online meetings, but the in-person ones really make a deeper difference for a lot of people.
Sure.
So we did lose a lot of the in-person connection, which is why now with We Support Recovery, with the nonprofit, we're focusing on sober events. We do them every single month. We try to get people in the same room together, and it goes beyond AA or NA or CODA, so different types of 12-step meetings. It goes beyond church meetings. It goes beyond recovery retreats. The cool part about We Support Recovery is that we kind of connect all of those groups.
Mm-hmm.
So someone might sort of exist just in this AA or NA 12-step pocket.
Sure.
But we try to connect all of us. So when we have these sober events, we have people from all over. So you want to talk a little bit about sober events real quick?
Yeah. I went to your website and I saw that there's a whole calendar. So you've gone through a fire hydrant of information. So it's very overwhelming. All the organizations and the places you can go for help. I hope that I can point them to your website. And
Sure. Yep.
So you can plug that now. It's
Absolutely.
WeSupportRecovery.org.
Yes.
So please go there. But there are a calendar of events that were fascinating. A lot of different ones that are just fun and entertaining and connected. And then some of them were also more clinical in the sense that you're going to seek help or whatever. But we can talk about some of the upcoming ones here. You had this one, Recovery Give Back Day. Go ahead and talk about what that is.
Absolutely. So eventually, our goal will be to have one Recovery Give Back Day per quarter. Right now, I think we've just had one or two last year, and so far this will be the first one. So we give people in recovery a chance to give back to their local communities. And also they can earn community service hours if they were required to have community service hours through something like treatment court. So we really enjoy doing those kinds of projects for treatment court participants. Mm-hmm. This one's open to the public as well, and the whole recovery community, but we do have a good number of treatment court participants who will help us scrape and paint the Frederick ice rink. So we're going to do that Saturday on June 24th, and We Support Recovery will provide lunch, and we'll just all be out there working the day, and it feels so good to work, and it feels so good because they know, the people in recovery know how much the community has given them. Mm-hmm. They all know it, and most of them, when they're in that early recovery phase especially, they cannot wait to give back.
Right,
so this
that's
is a
next Saturday.
Fun community service opportunity. Yep, next Saturday.
Cool. So then a fun one, I love going on the river with canoes, and my family does. So this is a trip down the St. Croix River. So what's this one about?
This will be our second annual hosting it through We Support Recovery, but Treatment Court actually started this about 6 years ago. And they would do it just with their group and with the members on the Treatment Court team so that they could all interact together and just have a great time. So we picked it up last year so that we could also involve the larger recovery community and the members who are from Onyx Sober Living, Butterfly House, Angel Hands Recovery Homes. So we have a wonderful time. We did it last year and we had 66 people attend. This year, Polk County is sponsoring it for their second time. Mm-hmm. So Polk County Behavioral Health is funding it for Polk County residents through their substance abuse block grant funds. And then non-Polk residents can still go and have a great time, but they just have to pay the rental fee through Riverwood Canoe.
Okay.
And that's on Sunday, July 9th. And there's two different times. The recovery community will launch at 11, and the general community will launch at 1 p.m.
Awesome. We have another slide, and I think this one was just how to connect.
Great. So we have a recovery text list that we just started last year. We use a special software that just helps us to get messages out. Any sober resource or sober event that's happening, recovery treatment program that just started, or For example, Amory Medical Center did a cooking class specifically for people in recovery. We were able to send that flyer out on this text list. So now we have about 200 people on there, and we're hoping to keep growing it. And the people who receive those texts forward them to their friends like crazy. It's fantastic. So it's better than social media because they get it right on their phone. It's better than email because hardly anybody opens emails anymore. But we really would love people to join that text list if you want to hear about recovery resources and events happening.
So they can do that by just going to texting 715-641-4626 with the word connect, and that'll put you on that list.
That's right.
And you probably can get off that list in the same way you got on by just sending end or something like that.
Yep, you text the word stop and it'll take you off the list. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I think that, you know, having your website, I looked through your website, lots and lots of information and really good information on not only what you're doing, but where you can get other resources. You also have, it's not just you and your husband that are doing this. I saw that you have a board of directors or people that are supporting you and advising you and helping make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. I would imagine there's probably some reporting you have to do and some things like that as a nonprofit. And then you also have some staff people that, do they work at the different homes?
Sure, I can explain that.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that as we kind of used our time up, and I want to make sure we don't bore people with all my details, but I really am intrigued by the housing because I think that is such a unique thing that is so needed. So I really appreciate what you do there.
Well, thank you. So with the nonprofit, we do have a board of directors and we desperately need more board members. So we are a faith-based organization, but not faith exclusive. So we have sort of two boards set up. We have a voting board who's Christian board members, and we are a recovery community organization, which means that 51% of our board must have lived experience with recovery and mental health, or mental health, I should say. So we really need board members. So if you're really passionate about that and you have that lived experience or family experience with recovery, please reach out to me. Go to our website, find my phone number on there. Then we do have financial supporters. We're a part of like the Give Big Day online donation campaign this year. We have gotten some grants from some wonderful organizations. We partner a lot with Polk County Behavioral Health to get some funding. But I, as the board president and sort of interim executive director, I am a volunteer. So I'm still trying to develop those funding partnerships.
Sure.
We do have staff through a partnership with Marshfield Clinic Health System. They have a program through AmeriCorps. So we have 2 recovery coaches through that program, and we have one person who is a community corps member. And then we have 1 part-time staff who works about 5 hours a week. So the recovery coaches do one-on-one coaching with people who are just needing that extra support and meeting their goals and identifying goals. They help keep them accountable. They meet with them every week out in the community. Mm-hmm. So they might go out for coffee, they might do a hike, they might go fishing, and then they kind of fill out some screeners and things just to help keep them on track. Our community corps member is working on a few things. She really helps us build church and business partnerships to keep these sober events going, to connect people in the community with churches if they want. And then our part-time person is building recovery-friendly workplace program. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much the main staff. We have 4 people that work for us in those partnership programs.
So if someone's watching this now or live or later and they say, well, I go to a church and I think this would be something that would really be good, how would they build that first step to, talking to their pastor or their priest or whatever they have to introduce the idea of a partnership?
I'd say the first step would just be to call me and we can talk through their own interests as well and what their church is already doing. We like to build on the strengths of the church. So I'll give you one example of a partnership we did have, which was fantastic. In February, Joy Lutheran Church in Centuria hosted our Sober Bowl party for us, and it was just so fun. And New Life Community Church in Dresser will be hosting our Friendsgiving this year. So on Thanksgiving Day, they're hosting a meal for people in recovery and their families. Frederick Seventh-day Adventist Church just a couple weeks ago, here June 4th. They hosted a fishing event and a food event out at Coon Lake Park in Frederick. So there's all sorts of different events they could do,
Cool.
depending on what they love to do as a church already.
Okay. And then if someone is listening to this and they want to volunteer or they want to get involved, maybe they have a background in some mental health counseling or have a history in recovery, and they want to give back a little bit, they can just reach out to you and have that conversation as well.
Excellent. We would absolutely love to have that involvement. And if it's not the right piece to be involved with We Support Recovery, we're involved in Partners for Recovery Coalition. We're involved with the Substance Use Prevention Work Group and Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, so we can help you find the right fit for where you'd like to serve.
Awesome. Well, Stacy, I want to thank you. My wife had told me about the Recovery House. I read an article in the paper in the Intercounty Leader and thought that this would be a great opportunity to just talk a little bit about what you're doing in the community, the efforts that you're doing. I think we have a lot of similarities in that we volunteer a lot, and I think that's so important. Many people make light work, and so thank you for what you're doing, for what your husband and you are doing for your foster kids. And I just would welcome people to go to her website and check out all the details. And yeah, it's really heartwarming to hear the stories of recovery, because so many times we hear the negatives. And so I want to thank you. I want to thank Ben Dryden for letting us be on his popular website and Facebook page, and for allowing the Kirk Anderson Show to go on. And my sponsor is Rhett Bozen. He's your authorized retailer for AT&T and Bug Tussle Wireless. So if you're ready for a new cell phone or provider, Rhett Bozen is ready to get you connected. You can skip the store and get personal support at your home or business. So call Rhett today at 715-771-3535 and mention Dryden Wire to hear about show specials. And that'll do it for this week, and we'll see you next time on the Kirk Anderson Show. Have a great day, everyone.